Thank you. Hi, I'm Tirath. I'm the CEO, founder of myOrb.com. What myOrb is actually, I should have just prepared this 1 second. I'm just going to get the home page up and then I can show you the system itself. But what myOrb is, it's a new concept. It's one code base across all devices, so it's browser based, which makes it super fast. We're using what is essentially the next generation of web technologies. And actually, it's quite a wide-ranging concept. I used to be an accountant, and I had the problem of information overload, in that I'm working on so many things, and that information is spread across so many applications, I couldn't keep up with it I was starting to struggle to keep up with it. And I thought, actually, what I need is a digital memory, which is separate spaces into which I can put any content from any source. And into those, and then from there, we can then invite people into closed environment, and you can start to collaborate. But the idea is that all your information is in one place and you're using less apps. So how it works is you can add content from the left-hand toolbar, content's in the middle, we've got a range of views, and then you've got all the communication aspects, and we're putting voice and video in quite soon as well. So it's all information types from pretty much every source, so it's links, websites, all of your storage, all your files of any type, pretty much of any size, and even executables you can store with a zip file. So really it's a case of it's your foundation of storage, but then everything, all of the other information you need as well. You get a choice of views, which are about to be upgraded, and I'll show you those. And then you've got collaborative, so you've got people, notes, emails, chat. We're gonna add time and tasks and literally anything you do in terms of your work and collaboration, we'll be adding those features as well over the next 2 to 3 months. And it's basically it's HTML5 technology, browser-based, which automatically means every device. So you don't need a mobile app, you literally just add to your home page and you're off. And we've got some example spaces there, but I'll jump into, we actually use it intensively internally. So for example, I was coming to Pitch Me Bro today, and we literally got booked in yesterday. So there's a Google map of here, which should come up any second. So that's all live as a link. Hang on, let's get rid of that, make it a bit bigger. This is a radio interview I did a couple of months ago on Mixcloud. I don't think I've got sound, but that's basically off Mixcloud. Here's a link of, this is a SoundCloud link, which you could play. And say if you've got an article, you just grab the link and you can paste that in. And what it will do is it will extract the text and the, it should extract the text and the thing. Hang on. Go over a bit fast. Let's add it in as a bookmark. Some websites obviously lock you out, so you can just paste the website in as a visual browse. We have like this view which is tailored for mobile, so it's like full width. We've got a grid view, so if it's very pictorial in terms of what you're doing, you can just bring up the pictures. And we've got a canvas, which is in its early stages yet, but here you can start to organize in a more chaotic way. And we're adding categorization, so like filing, so this will carve itself into zones, and your filing becomes very visual, so that your mind processes pictures 60,000 times faster than text. So the idea here is that you can get a picture of your filing rather than this sort of view, which is going to be live next week. So for example, we put all of our designs in here and we talk about them. Go to a more. So for example, our list view, which we saw a moment ago, will become more like Dropbox. When you go in and you start to create spaces, it's more like a drive, and you can create categories and start to file all of this information visually. But the concept is that everything you are doing, you can put into one space, into separate private spaces, which kind of reflects how we work day to day. And then from there, we can collaborate around them. And for example, we have our daily meetings on here now. So I'll have, so we have a 10 o'clock meeting every day. We add our information in and we chat about it. So if I go into my chat, we can chat. It's like a group email, so these are all of our members, it's all the staff. And if you want to quickly email somebody, you can just knock in an email, you can compose an email there. If you want to create a note, you can. And if you've got some sort of text or a document, you can start and copy and paste from a document straight into text, into a note. So I can create that note. And that note also appears as an item as well. And you can also, so you can go full screens, because it is basically an application rather than a web service. Just refresh that as that comes up. So what it is it's a general purpose application. It's like the Excel of sharing. You can share everything. And what that does is it makes it a little bit different because it's a bit of a paradigm shift in thinking because there isn't a similar service and we're just sort of almost backward engineering it to make it a bit more familiar for people. Where its utilization is highest, we work very closely with the University of Surrey. So the initial target market is lecturers who at the moment have to save their files on their virtual learning environment and then are creating Word documents of links and essentially emailing them out. The idea here is that you can get all of your information into one space and invite your students in. At the moment, it's email invites, but we're adding in the ability, let me just go to a more interesting space. I've got a lot. So for example, Tim Berners-Lee is where I get my inspiration from. So we do a lot of research around him. And every time I dive back into this, I might leave something for 2 or 3 months, but I go back in, I know exactly where I was. And McKinsey estimate that we spend about 19% of our time just trying to find information before we start. And also by having everything in and a social collaboration layer, obviously there's only a couple of us in this space, but by adding a social collaboration layer, it can increase creativity and productivity quite significantly as well. So there's a lot of tools in this space for collaboration, but each of them, they're either device specific, so you never get the full experience, or, but the older experience, if it's app-based, you're quite restricted in terms of how many features you can add, whereas we can literally start to add voice, video, and any other feature very quickly onto this, and ultimately it's a platform that we're aiming to be. So it's quite an ambitious project. It's one where it started with technology. Normally you start with a problem and then you apply technology and fix it. This was a vision I had about 7 or 8 years ago. It wouldn't go away. I was an accountant working on acquisitions, and 3 years ago I thought I need to dive into this because nobody else is doing it, and even now nobody else seems to have done it, which makes it very difficult because it's out there to get to market, and we've been live properly for about 7 weeks now. So we've been doing a bit. About more than 50% of people who log in are coming back for the second time, but now our challenge is how we get to market, and that's largely UI and onboarding, which is the reason why I'm here today, is to get your idea in terms of how it looks, feels, operates, would it be useful? And then the other side of that is, what are the use cases, which are the target markets we should be going after?
Fantastic. Yeah, that's your time up. That was great.
Thank you.
No, you can that one.
Oh, sorry. Thanks.
So you're specifically looking for kind of design and user interface?
Yeah, it's kind of, first of all, what do you think of the concept? Because it's a little bit out there. There are similar things, but they all do one thing really well. And what we're trying to do, our one thing is to do all of your information and all of your communications into private spaces really well. At the moment, it's private spaces where you're inviting people in individually, but in about 3 weeks' time, we'll have the ability that you can just email out a link and everybody who gets the link can come in. And then about a month after that, we're going to have followed spaces. So for the Twitter community, if you're collating lots of information, at the moment, you're tweeting out and it keeps on going out, but you're reaching lots of like-minded people, but there's no visual representation or place where you can come back together. And so that gives us a bit more virality because private spaces themselves aren't going to grow. They'll grow by word of mouth, but not to the speed that, you won't get the network effect that you'll get off of Facebook or the like.
Okay. So who's going to start us off? I've got Andrew at the back or Andrew at the front. I'll come to all of you. Just save my legs. I have to stand up all of today.
It's a really nice interface and it's really snappy, so congratulations. And yeah, it was really fast. I really like it. I use a lot of tools like this a lot, so particularly Pocket and Evernote. One of the things I like about this is the collaborative stuff, because Evernote's collaboration sucks. One of the features that both of those tools have that I don't think you have yet, which would stop me from using it, is a kind of sort of Chrome extension that I can add stuff quickly. So the whole copying and pasting the URL into the thing and having to have the app open would basically stop me from using this tool. But if you had that, then I would definitely consider it. And I guess another thing that I would be a bit worried about is, I know Evernote and Pocket have been around for a while, so I sort of trust them with my information. A new tool, I would be a bit worried about what happens when you go away. If you go away, hopefully you won't. So like some sort of way of downloading my content would be really great as well.
Okay, a number of questions there. One, the Evernote, actually, first one, I mean, our notes, our next pass of notes, hopefully will add all the features that Evernote have with the collaboration. But I've kept this self-funded and private. I worked with VCs for years, and I could see these stratospheric valuations pushing that creepiness of your information too far. So we don't look at any of your information at the moment. So in terms of privacy, our core principle is about privacy and freedom of expression in your private spaces. So we're not going to look at your data, and we're working with a big media company about using these followed spaces as an advertising environment, so that, but that you won't search them in the system. They will use that to go out, but our ads will be click-throughs to those spaces.
So I'm less worried about the privacy and more about like what happens if my information suddenly vanishes off the internet,
well,
if you run out of money and, you know.
Sure. Okay, well, hopefully we'll be around for a while, so we may take on investors. We've got a number of people
But as a consumer, I don't know that, so how do I know to trust you?
Yeah, well, it's one of those, obviously this is one of our biggest challenges, is that we need to establish ourselves in the market to gain that trust. We start from the basis that we're a private company and we never want to look at our users' data. Our next upgrade on the back end gives us about 4 times the speed, and with that, we're going to add an optional encryption.
As I say, I'm not worried about security. It's like, how do I back up my data? Can I download it all to my hard disk and then like reassemble it somewhere else?
Yeah, well, we're going to, at the moment you can download things individually. We're going to offer for a space, a download button for all of the files that are in that space. And where it might be a link or whatever, you'll just get a listing as you would currently. So these features, like for example, emailing information in is coming in about a month and a half's time. Yeah, we are predicated upon getting information in as fast and as easy as possible. Ideally, we don't want to have any downloads or plugins. So the Chrome extension is something that we're toying with, and it's actually quite easy to do. And we may do that, but what we are definitely going to do is email is still the central pillar of communication. And I think this wrapped around your email, we might do an email, the email inbox app integration, so you can actually bring your email accounts into the system. And so actually, you can just get the information in that way. So we're thinking of going that route, but we may actually go a bit further as well. But you're right, getting information in, I mean, you can drag a whole folder in, so you can, in some ways, get it in quickly, but there are shortcuts and bookmarking and those types of technologies are already out there. We've just got to think about how far we want to go until we reach a point where you need to download other things. At the moment, it's a case of any device, any browser, you log into myOrb, your information's there. If you need to download it and work offline, you can do that. But what we don't want to do is start to add lots and lots of apps or plugins and other periphery around it, because then we've got a very focused team. We've got 2 layers to our tech, and that allows us to iterate very quickly. It allows us to be very close to our customers.
I'm going to encourage you to maybe have this conversation afterwards, otherwise you're not going to get the feedback from everybody. So over here.
Yeah, you mentioned education as a key market for you. You've got direct comparators in terms of file repositories, in terms of Blackboard and Moodle. You've got a whole bunch of stuff which is less direct. So, for example, you can use, I think there's one called Twile, which is Twitter-based file sharing. You've got things like Pocket and Evernote. You've obviously touched on Evernote, but to me, particularly bearing in mind your primary use case of education, it's just not clear to me why your proposition is different from other stuff that's out there.
Okay, one is it's browser-based. So the average, you go to BET and you've got Microsoft, Google, Apple basically pushing their own platforms. And so for a school to convert, it's quite expensive. This just requires, in an average classroom, you'll have some kids with a pretty decent smartphone, a load of them with an average, some with none at all. The school can buy a few tablets, and because it's browser-based, we've got that advantage. That market's actually quite fragmented, and it's obviously most schools are on old sort of XP-type networks, and they were unable to access HTML5 browsers. With Edge browser, which this works really well on, it puts us sort of to the forefront and gives us a nice advantage. But the development of this, all the research for this was done with Surrey University, so we've been quite close to them. And the lecturers, we have lecturers that use it. They use it for onboarding students. They're doing that at the moment. So we've got a bit of a foothold, but you're right. It is a crowded market, but it's also quite fragmented. So we think that we can certainly get a foothold there. We do have a foothold in one university and the University of Creative Arts. The school sector is a lot more difficult because there's PTAs and whatever to get beyond. But it's not the only use case. It's a very generalist tool, but that's one place where each converted lecturer converts 50 to 100 students. So it's a very efficient way of getting users on board. And because it's a bit out there, it does take 5 to 10 minutes to really get the concept compared to doing one thing well where you'll get it in 8 seconds. So we find that's our best easy route into the market, but just our general tweeting seems to be getting users in, and more than 50% seem to be coming back 2 or 3 times at least. So we've got the general market, which hopefully will kind of grow of its own accord on a slow way, but we need to get a foothold somewhere, and that's, we think, is education. There's a lot of change going on with the new tech in that market, and our tech is very fast. Does all your storage, all your file transfers, and very fast. That Canvas works really well on the whiteboard, so it kind of gives that navigational aspect. But then you've got the ability to comment, chat, email, and there isn't a system out there that actually does all of it at the moment. So hopefully that advantage might get us over the finish line on that.
Okay, we have time for one more, so I'm handing over to this gentleman.
Slightly echoing the previous comment, I've worked with universities a bunch, and I don't see education here. I also don't see enough different than Evernote to use something other than Evernote, to be very honest with it. Evernote works in a browser. The only thing that's sort of missing, per the comment at the front, is the collaboration piece, but I use Slack. Yeah, Slack's awesome. And I've worked in organizations that use Link for Business, or whatever it's now called, Skype for Business. And those are superb collaboration tools within the corporate environment. And I don't see this displacing either of those. And I think that's going to be your challenge. It doesn't move the needle enough to push someone into that product and to trust someone new. Now, on the flip side, I don't necessarily like Evernote's privacy policies. I like the idea of British companies holding my data. Things like that are nice. So you've got potential to drive in and find an angle, but I don't think it's got a winning angle yet, from my perspective.
Yeah, I mean, this is our MVP. And
sure.
With Slack, our next iteration of chat will do everything that Slack does, but with Slack being separate applications, when you go into it, certain file types won't work. Things like video transcoding and playback is something that we'll have by Christmas. So the creative industry is one of our next target markets. We work closely with UCA to home in on what a creative, the range of files that they do. The base technologies that Evernote and Slack and everybody have, fine, I'm sure they can throw lots of money and build this, but we have a technological advantage. Now, for a business like us, okay, fine, we've got a challenge to get to market, but we also have a technology which is the other side of a speed bump they've got to get over. So in the outset, in self-funding this, it was one, okay, if we really look out, we get a great product, we get immediate traction, we get to market. Second choice, we might need investors who throw lots of money at it, but actually the most likely is with an acquisition target. And for those companies, they are buying up all of the companies that are similar to them in a space, and certainly on the technology base, we have an advantage over them, which they could shortcut by acquiring us. So we don't think we will lose out, but hopefully we will get off our own back.